You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Here's Chad Smith, chairman of the negotiating committee, with a negotiations update.
Good morning, Delta pilots. This is a negotiating committee update for contract 2019 for the week of February 28th, 2022. My name is Chad Smith. I'm your negotiating committee chairman, and I would like to give you a brief synopsis of our negotiating sessions for the days of February 1st, 2nd, 3rd, as well as the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of February. As I begin, please remember that next week, the week of March 7th, is the regular MEC meeting in Atlanta, Georgia. The MEC will receive a comprehensive, detailed briefing from the negotiating committee. Your elected representatives are the source of accurate information. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please direct them to your elected representatives. Let me jump into the briefing here now. I'll talk a little bit about Section 8, deadheading, Section 11, training, Section 13, leaves of absence, Section 22, filling of vacancies, and give you a look at Sections 12 and 23, which are going to be handled at our upcoming sessions of March 15th, 16th, and 17th. I'll also talk a little bit about the market-based cash balance plan, as well as global scope. I also want to put in a quick plug for the picketing that will be held on March 10th in Atlanta. If you aren't working, the MEC and the negotiating committee will be conducting picketing on that day, and I encourage all pilots available to come out and support the effort. I'll touch on global scope briefly here, just to give you an idea of where we're at with regard to the negotiations. They are continuing as able around all of our other negotiations with regard to full Section 6, but they are continuing and we are making progress, inching forward to come to an agreement on a new global scope that will measure wide body flying. We get the question a lot, why are we doing this outside of sections? In my opinion, the answer is simple, and there's two reasons for it. Number one, this is something that we want. We have wanted equal growth with our partners for a long time, and it would appear as if the company has finally committed to that concept. Number two, any change in Section 1 of our contract is important and needs to be a good enough deal to stand alone on its own. This is a deal that will go to membership ratification if we finish it and needs to be ratifiable by the pilots independent of any other rider that's tagged onto it. So we're trying to keep this deal standalone and good enough on its own to pass the muster of our pilot scrutiny. We're getting closer to a deal, but there are a few very important details that we still need to iron out. So more information to follow. Section 8 will be the first section I talk about, deadheading. It has been parked by the mediator. It's one of those sections where we lag the industry, United being the gold standard. We have heard the frustration from our pilots with being stuck in a middle seat on a long flight, and the deadhead itself actually being more fatiguing than if the pilot had actually operated the flight. These are all concerns with regard to deadheading, and we are standing firm in this section. Moving on to our training section, Section 11, another section in which we find ourselves lagging the industry, but we have had some progress in this section. I think we're getting a little bit closer to conceptual agreement on this. We're not there yet. We have a few more details we need to iron out with the company, but the goal of this section is to separate it into two different sections. In other words, our contract will have a new section upon the completion of contract 2019. There will be pay, scheduling, and work rules for students, and pay, scheduling, and work rules for instructors, line check pilots, and line validation pilots. Again, we aren't there yet, but the strides forward we've made already in Section 11 will drag us out of the basement of the industry and hopefully provide some momentum if we can finish it up on March 15th, 16th, or 17th to close this section out and start moving forward to some of the other sections of the contract. Section 13, leaves of absence, is one of those sections that's somewhat detail-oriented and oftentimes flies below the radar and becomes overcome by events in other contract negotiations. We're trying to avoid that in this one. Progress is slow in it. We have made some advance. Just to give you an idea, maternity, paternity benefits are part of this. FEMLA, family leave, is one of the things that we're trying to address and plow some new ground with. Military leave is one of those things we're trying to give some much needed attention to, just been avoided over the years. That's where we're at here. Progress is slow, much slower than Section 11, I would say. We will keep at it, but this is one of those sections of the contract that is very optical to the company. They have other employee groups that keep an eye on this section very carefully. It becomes our concern because it is the company's concern. We'll give the MEC a full briefing next week at the meeting and carry on from there. Section 22, filling of vacancies, is another one of those sections where we dramatically lag the industry. Our goals in this section are twofold. Number one, reduce the amount of time from when you bid for a new position to when you are actually sitting in the seat of that new position. Goal two would be to give pilots some semblance of control over their lives for training as they do during the bidding of their monthly schedules. In other words, during the conversion window, be able to select when you go to training, what training schedule you have, what simulator periods you have, when you need to be off for life events, and things like that. The company seems amenable to make some improvements in this section, but not to the extent that the negotiators are satisfied it will be palatable to the pilots. I would characterize progress in this section as extremely slow. We have had a lot of turns, what we call TURNS turns, back and forth with the company, and not a lot of progress is being made at this time. I'll touch very briefly here on the market-based cash balance plan. It's currently on a kind of three parallel tracks right now. The first one being the plan document needs to be agreed upon between the union and the company. That's in its final stages, and that should be finalized shortly. The second and third paths are reliant on the government. And as we all know, sometimes the wheels of the government can move a little slower than we'd like. We'll have some more answers for the pilot group shortly. Section 12, hours of service, and Section 23, scheduling, will be the topics of conversation, at least the primary topics of conversation at the negotiating sessions with the company and the mediator. We will be briefing the MEC at next week's regular MEC meeting and finalizing our positions in those sections. We did have some conversations on these sections prior to COVID when we were in mediated sessions. And unless things have changed, our priorities with regard to sections 12 and 23, the company's priorities with regards to sections 12 and 23 are mostly diametrically opposed. The company is interested in greater flexibility and more productivity with more access to reroute, while we're interested in the complete opposite. We know this is a sensitive subject with our pilots right now with regard to rotation construction, reserve utilization, and general quality of life. And again, I encourage everybody who isn't flying next week to show up for the picketing event in Atlanta. One last item to update is the 321 NEO pay rates. Section 3 of the contract sets the standards for the establishment of new pay rates for new pieces of equipment at Delta. There's a timeline and a process all delineated very carefully in Section 3. Our approach is simple. Company statements and all metrics of the aircraft indicate that this is a 757 replacement, and as such, it should be compensated in the same manner as the 757. Enough said on that subject, and we are awaiting the company's response. That's all I have for this update. I will remind you that any questions, comments, or concerns should be directed to your elected representatives, and those comments do filter down to us, just so you're aware. You can expect recurring updates throughout the course of Contract 2019 negotiations, so please listen to them, read everything you get from the union, and stay engaged, especially at the picketing event. I hope to see you all out there.
You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform, and receive notifications when a new episode is available.